Hey, and welcome to the Reset Podcast. Everything you need to know that your therapist probably never told you. Researched by experts, real life experiences. This is Reset.
It's an interesting concept that came up this past week working with someone, and they said it in such a, I don't know, like a poetic way, which is...
So are you telling us you're not going to give it to us in a poetic way?
No, I don't know. I'm going to cut off the fat off of this meat, which is this. You can either respond or react to people. You can either respond or react to your children. You can either respond or react to your spouse, partner. You can either respond or react to anyone. And when you're healthy and come from a healthy place and you feel really confident and secure who you are, you're more of someone who responds to people.
What about like on the freeway?
Oh, that's more reaction place.
Is that always going to be a natural
That's a good point.
Reaction?
But this is a good point. You have to be tested to figure out if you're in a state of response or reaction. And I think what they're trying to get to is a lot of my mistakes in relationships, a lot of my mistakes in parenting has come from a place of reacting. And then I had to clean up the mess. I had to go back, apologize, have a multiple or have another conversation around what I really meant to say was this. And I think that was kind of opening for me, like eye-opening for me to recognize I didn't think about it in that way, that how much I think, especially for my role as a parent, comes from a place of reaction versus response. Obviously, when it's easy to react well when your kid chooses something well in that moment. But as you know, and you described it in many ways on the soccer field, I'm that parent that does a lot of reacting when it comes to the 12-year-old referee or something like that. And I need to learn to respond better. And sometimes the responsive self is to say nothing at all. While the reactive self feels obligated, I need to say something. The reactive self says, I want to be right, or you're embarrassing me, so I need to correct you, or feels that a critique is needed because... fill in the blank. The reactive self has a justification part of it, has a causation part of it. I think it's part of it, and I'm not sure when you're trying to be a healthier version of who you are. I think we have more response mode than we do reaction mode. Does that make sense at all?
I mean, what I'm hearing is the healthier you are emotionally and mentally, the better you're going to respond versus react.
And I think response also has this component of like intentional, let's say it's parenting, intentional caring, loving, whatever it may be. And so I think a response comes from a message that you want to send to that person. And so it has like this great purpose behind it that's greater than the words. Mm-hmm. While reaction wants to develop or create an emotion in that other person so that they are feeling what you're feeling. You're trying to create attunement with someone in all the wrong ways. Now, is there moments when reactions are probably healthy and good? Yeah, obviously I think there's some
running into the street.
Right, outlier situations when a natural consequence will probably cause, like you said, death. Or I think when it comes to just, emergency responses, things like that, right, where the reaction, I think, is justified or needed. But we're talking about everyday life. Is right. How we go about it in a way where we purposely take that space to create a response. I was thinking about when it comes to like behavioralism, you have a stimulus and a response, and in between is something that it's space. It's something called appraisal, and the appraisal needs to be one. And so the appraisal is the concept is once the stimulus occurs. Let's say, I don't know, you say something that hurts me, and my gut reaction is to hurt you back for you to feel my pain. Is that in between time of you saying something is hurtful, the appraisal comes in where I have this moment that if I think about it, I can respond in a way that's healthier. For example, ouch, that really hurt me. I prefer if you said something or said it nicer because now I feel sad. Does that make sense? Is that how do we win that space in between? And I think the longer we take an appraisal in that situation of trying to appraise our response, the healthier or the more opportunity we have to respond versus react.
Yeah. I think the biggest way we can see this is with parenting, and I think that's why whoever you were speaking with was talking about parenting. And I think we can do this with anybody, like you were saying in the beginning, spouse, friends, family. But I have noticed for sure 100% the most that I am reactive is with you and our kids, which, I'm sure we see that in our own kids too. They treat us more reactive than responding with their friends because we're in a comfortable space. But we've also had this conversation of how sad that the people that we're the closest to sometimes get the worst of us. Implementing those practices into the place of our home is really where it should start and where it should root from instead of the opposite. Because I have noticed in my own self, and I've worked this out with my therapist, like what are my triggers when I am mean to you as my spouse or mean to my kids or just like impatient or whatever it is. And for me, I've noticed if I have a lot on my mind, a lot on my plate, or I'm anxious, that's when I become reactive. Because you don't know what's going on in my brain. You just say something like a sentence. And for me, that is one more thing that I cannot take because I'm in this collapsing stage. So I've noticed to get out of that mode in my head, I have to be continually working through those things or I'm going to be reactive. And it always makes me feel so sad and guilty as a parent when my kid really is asking an innocent thing and I completely overreact, or I'm in the middle of something and I overreact. Granted, I think our kids need to learn sometimes you have to wait and be patient. But that's when that little intermediate space that you're saying, we can say, honey, hold on, I'm in the middle of something. And then finish what you're doing and then respond. But for me, I've noticed when I'm not well, basically what you're saying, when I'm anxious or there is something that I am ruminating on or I cannot get out of my mind or I'm tired, it's almost like that halt, right, with addicts. Hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. But I've noticed that in my own self.
That's a good point, right? We get a lot of reactionary living when you have a halt in your life.
Yeah. So I ask myself those things, or if my kid's reactive, I step back and I'm like, whoa, that was not the appropriate response for what I just asked or said. That was a level 10 response. And then I have to kind of think, what time is it? When's the last time we ate? Are you feeling lonely? Are you tired? So give them some grace and gives yourself some grace. But it's again, we don't have a lot of time sometimes to think before we're reactive or responsive. So I don't know if you noticed, maybe when you're stressed out, is that when you're more reactive or
I think for
like
me,
that?
it's just when I'm always in a hurry or I don't have a lot of margin to work with and my day is full. Then because I'm on to the next thing mentally before we get there. And so when you're trying to, or someone tries to delay that to me, that's when I become a reactionary because I feel like I'm already 2 steps in my mind or 2 items ahead of where I want to be. And then we're here. Here's where my reactional self gets tested is when every time we went to Disneyland, we had those season passes because there's nothing like Disneyland is hurry up and wait.
Yes. And
you're seeing these lines and you try and beat the system. What ride you do next, and then create the app to tell you what rides, how long is this ride versus that ride, and and everyone has a hack at Disneyland. I couldn't quite figure out the hack for us,
right?
But when you're at Disneyland, you do get tested. I mean, one of our greatest, I think not greatest, but I think one of our more fun date nights we had is we really enjoyed before we had kids was to go to Disneyland, sit in line, and just stare and watch at everyone doing horrible parenting jobs, or just count the amount of future divorces based on reactions that we were seeing,
right.
And not knowing that was our future, which is we were the ones at times with parenting, like when half of the $10 churro falls on the ground, right. And it's not a lifesaver. And so you can't just, act like a lifesaver of those things, bud. You just eat it. You know what I mean? But I do think
it's not the happiest place on earth.
No. And so, but I do think this is a concept that takes conscious awareness. Mm-hmm. And I do think for me at least, is with this year being one of my goals to work with more margin and to allow myself to be presently known to others around me, is that will allow me to think more in terms of response than reaction. And I think that it could be in many ways for people, and obviously I'm admitting to myself, that's a character flaw. The worst is when we see it with our kids, when they start responding the way we respond to them, when they respond to each other, and we're freaking out, oh no, we just planted that seed and started fertilizing it. But I think that's why it is important for us to be more responsive than reactionary.
I agree. And I think, to be honest, you're way better at this than I am. I think that you are, I would say, way more responsive than reactive. And I mean, it's a good model for me because there's so many times where I'm like, oh yeah, why did I react like that? That didn't need to happen. But to say that also, I think you were saying everybody needs to be conscious and work on it. But I do think some people are just born with a little bit more innate ability to respond and not react.
Sure.
And so but I think that's to be celebrated, like to not get frustrated. I think a lot of times I'd be like, why isn't it that easy for me? Well, that's just not the way my brain was made. I got an ADHD anxious brain. So I can't use that as an excuse for my whole life. I got to really think through it. And like you said, be conscious. And some people can do that easier. Not saying you're perfect. I mean, you've had, of course, many reactive responses, but not as many as I feel like I do on the daily that I have to constantly work through. And that's okay. It's okay to look at somebody and say like, yeah, I want to be more like that. It's a little more natural for you. Not saying that there's not moments you have to be aware and conscious. Like that's some people, we're just going to have to work at a little bit more.
Well, it is true. There's just that natural aspect of your personality type that you're born with. I think the beautiful part is that God gave us this cortex in our brain that actually gives us an opportunity to choose to change and even to change certain characteristics of ourselves that we want to, we can.
Is that like a turn on line with your spouse? Like your cortex is looking real good right now.
Yeah, well,
I can tell you.
Are you talking to me right now?
I can tell you've been working on your cortex.
Well, I've been working.
Or your cortex has been really like activated lately.
Is that what we say when we do a great response versus a reaction? That is one heck of a cortex, babe.
Yeah.
It's like,
or is it only when you're with someone in psychology?
Well, it's like when you came home from like our kids' therapy and they're like, we talked about Amy today. I'm like, who the heck's Amy?
Yeah.
How many people am I hiring for this child?
No, but so this is why I think if one of your kids ever has to go to therapy, it's actually really cool because the way that children learn is really how we should learn as adults sometimes, because it's brought back to this like storytelling way.
This is the segment of the show where we talk about ancient proverbs. Useful thoughts that we still use today. Thoughts that are deep and show us the way. Wisdom, lessons, teaching. Throw out your doubt, search what's inside. Let's go find out, let's go deep, not wide. Ancient proverbs. Ancient proverbs. Ancient proverbs.
Today's ancient proverb is, better a wound from a friend than a kiss from an enemy.
Ooh, that's good.
We've heard it.
Many times.
I'm sure you have.
Many times. And I don't like it.
He doesn't like it. I don't like it.
I think I want kisses from everyone. I don't know. Maybe more of a...
Yeah, I don't think anybody really wants wounds. But
like this is like a Godfather one. Like, keep your enemies close or your friends close, enemies closer. Is that your Godfather words? Or impersonation?
I'm trying to put the cotton in my mouth.
What is wrong with you? We're going to lose male audience with your Godfatherness that you're doing right now.
It's so good. Come on.
It's hilarious. I wish they could see you doing it. It's even funnier. But I do think this is a good one. Because I think so oftentimes with friendships, we take certain honesty and truths very personal, and we think it doesn't come from love. Or we think the person's not coming from a good place because we're sensitive to it, or because we are feeling certain things that we just don't want to feel from that object, since we like to seek confirmation bias from other people, or to seek confirmation bias just in general from many people, including like our own parents and family. And I think this is so beautiful that it's better to have a wound from a friend, friends that are honest and truthful, show us maybe our blind sides, recognize maybe areas that we're having deficits in that we're not seen, and it comes to our own character or integrity, than it is a kiss from an enemy, which is like
a compliment,
right? Like, or just
from an enemy.
We want, right? Or hearing our enemy lie to us that you're great, you're awesome. It kind of reminds me of like a reaction formation, which is a defense mechanism in relationships or in psychology, where Freud talks about like a defense mechanism is where someone comes in, they have a, like, let's say they don't like you. Like, let's say I walk in, I don't like you. You make me angry. I'm upset. And I walk around like, oh my gosh, Kristin, I love you. You are the best. You are the greatest. And the reality of it is, do I feel that? No, I'm hiding my true thoughts, my true feelings from you. And so my defense is I act in complete opposite. And I think this proverb kind of talks about this. And I think that concept is so true when it comes to our inner circle and our friends. I think we desire for them, those who are really close to us, we desire for them to be honest and real than to just lie and just give us kisses.
I think yes. However, I think when it is done, a lot of times it can't be received well. I know you and I are really big on accountability with friends, like few friends. It doesn't have to be posting it on Instagram, y'all. Your deep struggles and whatever you're going through, or you're asking somebody for character refining, right? True close friends. And then when they give it to us, or you give it to somebody else, I think it can be a really hard thing to actually face and realize. But we're really big on saying we have to care more about the friend, about the person, than the friendship. Because if someone had actually asked us our opinion and someone had asked us advice and we give it to them in an honest way out of love, and they get mad and decide they don't want to be friends with us anymore, even though they wanted that, right? That honesty.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. Like, which is, I think if you're someone that's on, let's say, social media a lot and posting things for your business or different things about your life, it doesn't take long to get negative comments. And those are not the wounds that we're talking about.
Right.
Those people don't know you. Those people don't understand what's going on in your life. We're talking about people who are close to us. And I think that comment or that statement, and maybe that's another proverb, which is the aspect of it's better. It's some people prefer to protect the friendship than they do the friend. And sometimes we have to be willing to say things that might be hard, even though the friendship may take a hit or a dent, but know that the right friend or the right friends that you're with will be able to recover in that friendship with you. Mm-hmm. And at the end, it ends up being something that propels them closer to you, not compels you away from them, or where it may
Repels
be.
you.
Yeah. Repel, compel, propel.
Montel.
I don't know. Montel Williams? This is turning to Montel Williams, I feel like. And so, is he still around? I don't even know. That's like, I feel like that belongs in our other 1900s bit that we do is Montel Williams. But I think that's interesting because I think today, pull it together, Jardine.
I'm just at the giggles today. Really bad.
But I think in today's world, there is this concept where people are okay with friendships as long as there is no wounds, and where hard things are not discussed or talked about or maybe even critiqued, including, I think, even in marriages. A lot of people want their spouse to just be a confirmation bias to who they are. Narcissists want this. They don't want to be told what's wrong with them or they're doing wrong. And we just get in these relationships where there isn't those accountability and there isn't then a growth mindset, a growth to it. And the byproduct out of it is there ends up just being like stalemates. Like in relationships, you go from a soulmate to a stalemate. Yeah. At that point, or a cold mate or any type of mate that's out there. Checkmate. Montel Williams mate.
I think too, we can all agree, well, hopefully we all want to be the best versions of ourselves. So we want to know our blind spots because a lot of times we don't know what they are. And that's where that comes in, where a friend can maybe tell you something and it might be painful, or your spouse tells you something and it might be painful, but hopefully growth comes out of that. And that's all we can hope for is, wouldn't we rather be told those things so we grow?
Well, and there is a thin line between coming from a place of love and just coming from a place of just being a jerk. I forgot who said this, and probably should know, but there's another great proverb I think that says
Montel Williams.
No, maybe Montel Williams said this is that some people stab to heal, and while other people stab to kill.
Ooh, that's good.
And I think words are like that, and so you can speak the truth with love, where you could say hard or have hard conversations or hard truths. And I've had them before. I think about some of my big turning points in my own character life or just my own personal life or integrity life has occurred with people having those hard conversations I know that it's happened. I think the first time really was when I was like 18, 19 years old. One of my buddies who went to high school with and just had a really good conversation with me one night saying, "You're just really bitter and we miss the old Joe. What happened? What's going on?" And that just like clicked with me. Hard to hear, but open up a conversation. You know that I had an accountability group for about 4 to 5 years where we met every Wednesday night, just me, a bunch of men or 4 other guys, and we just discuss hard things that are going on in our lives, but also give feedback at times in hard ways that would hold us accountable, but also promote growth. But it's out of love because we don't want, if I really care and love you, even as a friend, I don't want you to go down a path that may lead down to a certain place that might be hard for you or might cause issues or problems.
Or hurt other people.
Right, or just hurt your own self.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember in graduate school, our last year at graduate school, you take this class, I think it was called, I don't know, like psychopath. No, I don't know, psycho something. Psychologist, psycho something. But it was part 3. That's all I remember. And the teacher had challenged us. And the challenge was, and he said, you can do this to even your clients if they really want to have growth, which is if you want to grow, have growth spurt, ask your friends and family, how does it feel when you see my name come up on your cell phone and me calling you? How does it feel when you know that I'm being invited to this? How does it feel when I walk into the room? Do you feel joy, excitement? Do you feel this is going to be a long night, stress, anxiety? Do you feel avoidance? Because if they speak honestly to you and truthfully to you, you'll learn a lot from that. So the growth doesn't always have to come from wounds. It come from the aspect of even the joy aspect of it, being honest. And so the honesty could be good, But I thought that was always an interesting challenge looking back that he gave us that I 100% did not do, and I 100% was afraid to do. And honestly, I don't think a lot of people did in the class because you can only imagine. But I think about it, if we actually did that, and I know there's certain people probably in our own lives that we wish that they did do that and invite our opinion, and you know who you are, contact us. And so I think it's a concept in which, it really allows us to open up in that way.
How do you feel when my name comes across your phone?
What do you need? That's
exactly what I was going to say about you. Is that funny?
We
don't call each other because we see each other all the time. It's more what happened with the kids?
What did you forget? Yes. Was the garage door open? Where's the dog at?
That's so funny.
I need help.
Yeah.
There's always, you're right. It's more like is it more of a bat signal in this day and age when husband and wives contact each other? Or it's like, really, are you still at Target?
Yeah. Can you get this for me? It's different. It is funny to think about a spouse calling because it is like you see them every day. I think it's more definitely. I mean, I just said that to be funny, but what it would be like for people outside your immediate home life that you see all the time. Well, although your kids could probably spur some anxiety in you if you saw their names come across.
That's true. Like, oh my
Ours
gosh,
don't have phones yet.
No. But I was thinking how different it was when we were dating and you're calling. Yeah. It's like, oh my, yes, like,
your heart can we have all excited.
It's because it's great conversation. Now it's like, oh, dude, we have to buy now. What's going on? What broke? What broke?
Gosh.
Does that change later on in life? We got to find out. We need to interview someone who's later on.
Because we text more. A call means you didn't respond to my text or like I'm driving or it's like I need to know right now.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Cool.
Sweet. Montel Williams in the house. Ancient Proverbs out.
Now back to the show.
Why don't you talk about Amy?
Yeah. Okay. So our kids were learning about your amygdala, and it's spelt like
Amy.
So her name is Amy,
G-D-L-A.
and so it's like Amy G. Migdala is her name.
D-A-L-A.
Yeah. So it's like Amy D. Migdala. So it's Amy, and basically, so our awesome kids therapist was saying that okay, we have this little Amy in our brain.
Amy is 2 almond clusters in your brain.
Yeah. Well, and so our kids, made the little actual almond shape of Amy.
Yep.
And so visual,
Yep.
So basically, Amy is the part of your brain that's fight or flight. But sometimes Amy can be overreactive. When the situation is like a level 1 or 2, we don't need to go to a 10.
Is that when Amy turns into a Karen?
So Amy turns pretty much into a Karen. Yes. And so Amy's going to tell you things like, no, run. I can't do that. Absolutely not. Start crying, whatever it is, right? So we, kids write down exactly what, Amy's going to tell you. And then now it's our job, the part of our brain, like we were talking about, your cortex probably is what tells you, freeze. Is this a level 10 problem, Amy? We need to talk to. So what do we tell Amy?
Yeah, when your executive functioning finally comes in,
yes,
to quietly tell Amy, be quiet. You're annoying.
So then you can tell Amy, stop. That's not true. Or like, hey, I'm panicking over this homework assignment. I have 5 hours left in the day. I'm going to get it done, instead of, I can't do it. Whoa, take a step back. Amy, you're overreacting.
We graduated in our family from talking to our kids about red zone, yellow zone, and green zone.
Oh,
which
yeah,
I think we started age like 4 or 3. You're in the red zone. Get back to the green. To now we're talking about neuroscience with them. Mm-hmm. And so now our kids become a little fight or flight, overwhelmed, anxiety, what it may be. We're like, your Amy's showing.
Yeah. Well, it actually breaks tension too, though.
It
Humor
does,
is really good.
And then we give them 2 almonds. Say, chew on this, a little grounding technique. Chew on your almond. Chew on Amy. And once you swallow those almonds, little Amy's
dead.
Amy's gone. We need a new you. We need Amy just to chill.
Yeah.
Here's the interesting part about this. So they did research on cats. This is back in the day where psychology got away with everything. And so that's when we did research on people.
Unethical things.
Yeah. So what they did was they put a cat with a mouse in a box. And so what does the cat do? The cat goes up to the mouse and destroys it. So then they did was they put electrical shock or electrodes on the amygdala, Amy, and so they activate it. So the cat would be scared. The cat will go frightened mode and would actually like hiss, like it's scared, right? So what they did is then they put in the cat back in the box with the mouse, and when the cat would look at the mouse, it would put a little electricity on the amygdala, and the cat would be scared of it. So they would do it enough where then they stopped putting the electrodes on the brain, and the cat would continue to be scared of the mouse, even though genetically it was made to go after.
It's the predator in the situation.
Right. And so what happened was they're able to successfully make the predator to not a prey, just to be scared of the mouse. And so think about how much Amy can actually create and nurture a conditioned self.
Wow.
That is unhealthy, that is scared, saying they should not be scared. Think about now things that people get scared of, that they shouldn't be scared of, that Amy is forcing us to be scared of.
Because we need her. We need Amy to tell us when there's danger.
100%.
Like you were saying before, there are situations you got to be reactive. And the interesting thing is this last exercise that the kids did was what are the irrational fears in Bob? We're going to talk about Bob's Amy to kind of get it separate from yourself. and so kids write down the craziest things, like he's afraid of pumpkins and he's afraid of paper. Those are irrational, and those are the things we're talking to Amy about to calm down. We're not going to tell Amy to calm down when it's an emergency, because we need her in those adrenaline moments, right? It's like you're saying, which is so fascinating to think about. This is where anxiety comes from, though. The more that Amy's activated in a negative way, it's showing like that paper is terrifying. I cannot touch that piece of paper. Like, it is so scary to me because you've conditioned it that way. But then how cool it is, like you were saying with your cortex, you can uncondition and relearn and get a better habit going.
Right. And this is where we talk about this more different day. We won't go longer. This is where we talk about operant conditioning, versus classical conditioning when it comes to us. But you think about, so my social psychology class, I show them a movie like for about 2 lectures worth regarding white supremacists and gangstas. Is that the right word?
It's the whitest version of that word.
Gangstas. I'm talking of, yes, Crips, Bloods, you name it, right? Gangstas. Yeah. And you grew up in Central Cal.
Yeah, I know.
I grew up in the hard streets of South Orange County. Yeah, so we both get it.
You did not understand.
So, but in the movie they interview all these gangstas and white supremacists. They just are constantly, it's not the person. Here's the thing. The person isn't talking as I tell the class. It's their Amy talking. It's their amygdala. Because all they're talking about is either how some race is trying to overcome and overthrow us, or they're talking about it's about turf wars. We got to protect who we are. It's about pride. And they are all coming from this place of fear, not really power. And so the funny part is like for example, like the white supremacists always talk about white power, white power, white power. And the concept of there's no white power there. It's actually fear. It's Amy coming out. And so it's fear-based, not power-based. And then you go back to that's driving it. Then you go to look at the gangstas when they start talking about what's going on in their neighborhoods and when they grew up. Is they're always talking about fear. They're always like walking paranoid, that anytime they could do a drive-by, or anytime this could happen, that could happen. And they always talk about the deaths of the people who are closest to them who got shot. And so Amy's just constantly going. And so they're always in just that fear-based mode. So what happens to them? Well, if you watch, the documentary, what happens to them is even though they don't want, like for example, white supremacists, they don't allow drugs or alcohol. They don't. Like that's part of their creed. But yet they all do heroin. A lot of them drink, if not all. Because some way, if you don't have a ways to regulate your conditioned self that's caused by Amy, I really feel bad for people now called Amy, is that what happens is that they have to then use substances. And so I think about this when it comes to a lot of my clients, when marijuana became a medical card they could get, or now it's just depending on the state, it's legal. Is a lot of them they will use marijuana THC to calm Amy down, versus trying to use different coping skills. And the byproduct of it is, then they have THC abuse or I've seen THC overdose in my practice. I've seen addiction. I've seen schizophrenia caused by THC. I've seen bipolar caused by ADHD. Or ADHD, bipolar.
I hope not.
That was an ADHD moment, which I never have, by the way.
It's okay, I got you.
But bipolar caused by THC, and so because all of a sudden the habit becomes an addiction, or the usage becomes an addiction. It's counteractive with Amy, and so which is really interesting because all we're talking about is the concept of people having a hard time understanding how do we regulate Amy, and at the same time is how do I recognize my conditioned self? It's kind of like for years our son was conditioned by the movie Home Alone that I introduced him to age 4.
Oh, he was not that young.
3, I don't know, paralyzed or hijacked.
Stuck.
Because Amy loves to hijack the healthy part of you.
You know what? Like we said, we want to apologize if your name is Amy. However, we still need Amy's in our brain, okay? So, Amy, you're not a negative name. You're actually a positive name. We just need to learn to condition you well.
I feel like we need to create a sticker about Amy with 2 almonds. Just like you do. Remember your one video you did of you eating a walnut? You're like, this walnut looks like a brain. Yeah. And then our brain needs walnuts for good fats. And I'm like, oh my gosh, where's this going? That is when your ADHD superpower comes in. No, and you come up with these great ideas. I'm like, dang.
I really just think that it was God showing off. He's like, let me make an omega fat that looks exactly like a brain because it's for your brain. Ooh, let's create walnuts.
Yes, and I can't eat a walnut because I think I'm eating brains.
Ew.
It's just gross. It's too much like not Lord of the Rings. They call it the
flies.
No, Silence of the Lambs. I don't know. I think lambs, flies. I have no idea. This is just.
My gosh, that's
Amy
funny.
is activating me right now, and I'm getting a little weird.
Yes,
a little weird.
So basically, we got to condition Amy if she is not naturally going to be responsive.
Well, here's what
not
you do with
reactive.
Amy. Right. Here's what you do with Amy. You speak back to it. You don't listen to it.
Yeah.
Amy has a place, and probably, 75% of the time it's not needed. Because Amy is needed, earthquake happens, catastrophic, issues, concerns, whatever it may be. And even like in sports, there's a place for Amy as well. If we feel like we're, do or die, we need to get going. There's an activity aspect to it. But we do need to have the ability to speak back to Amy. Don't listen to Amy. Like use your active listening. Use your active words against and by the way, we talked about this before, like studies show when you're able to put a name to your emotion like a person, like you name depression Bob, or you name your anxiety Gina. I'm just going to use every name possible. And you talk back to Gina, no. And then you say Amy, like Amy, not today. I'm not going to do this. Like in your mind, internally doing that, it actually allows you to get more control of that emotion. And so then you can respond versus react.
Do you think there are so many people in the world who think like this more so than not? Like where irrational fears, or do you think it's like a smaller sect of people?
No, I think it's abundant. I think it's obvious. We can now see with social media, if you just read the comment sections, how reactionary people are.
That's true.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think we see it even from people's response to COVID, you know, that Amy really was activated and could create some, you know, false evidences that pure real like
fears. Yeah.
And so, you know, I think continually, if you listen, I forget who said this, but if you want, someone said that the first step of overcoming depression or sadness is turn off the news, right? I think they said stop reading the newspaper. Then it was like turn on the news. Now it's like people don't go on social media, right? And so I think this keeps going because Amy needs to be triggered, or Amy needs to meet something that she feels desires to be very reactionary, you know, to protect you and save you.
Well, we weren't created to know all the information we know. And I think we've talked about this before, but our brains were not meant to hold.
Not at all.
And to know everything that's happening everywhere. And I mean, it's just the world wasn't created like that before, where we had the ability to know what was happening even 3 cities over, you know. And so now that we know everything, which in a way is great, where it's like, okay, we can help globally and communally is great. But second, it gets too much. And like you're saying, that part of your brain that gets, you know, activated to create all this anxiety, that's not healthy anymore.
No. Well, I think about, we grew up with the saying, you know, don't compare yourself to the Jones next door, the Joneses, right? Yeah. That's one family.
Yeah.
Now kids, even parents and people our age and adults, you know, we're comparing ourselves not to the Joneses, but we're comparing ourselves to the Joneses all over the world. So instead of comparing yourself to one person, you compare yourself to potentially hundreds of thousands of people every day, depending on what you are, you know, reading and watching and listening to. And so it's just really wild to think about that. Our brain's not meant to take on so much information, or our brain's not meant to go through, you know, several comparison moments throughout the day.
Yeah.
It's just not healthy.
And all the emotions you feel with it and anxieties you feel with it. So you got the brain going, you got the emotions going. Then the physical part comes in because you're unhealthy in the other ways. You know, it's a vicious cycle. We got to get Amy under control, people.
Who said it? Was it Ice-T? No.
What? Is that a rapper?
Ice Cube? Ice-T's a rapper, yes. Yeah, it's not Sweet Tea. It's Ice-T.
No, it's not.
Yes, Ice-T is a rapper.
Is this before I was born?
No, maybe. I think it's Ice Cube that said, and I'll keep it clean, dang, it feels good to be a gangsta. Right? Yes.
Sure.
But the reality of it, it's a lie. It doesn't feel good to be a gangsta because every gangsta is
We know
is
the truth
Amy.
now. Listen.
Yeah. So every time you see a gangsta doing their thing, just yell out Amy to them.
Oh my gosh. Again, we apologize, Amy.
We apologize for all the gangsters that may be hurt by this.
Thank you for listening to the Reset Podcast. We're so glad that you joined us. If you enjoyed this episode, would you take a moment to leave us a review and maybe even hit that subscribe or follow button? Also, pay it forward by sharing this podcast with a friend. For free resources and to learn more about coaching for individuals, athletes, couples, and teams, go to theresetgroup.com. And we would love to connect with you on Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok @The Reset Group. See you soon.